this episode of Grief in Common, we talk about OCD and death throughout. Hi everyone, welcome back to Winston's Wish Grief in Common podcast. This is a bonus episode because Nell and I couldn't stop talking on the previous one. But if you want to hear a bit more about mine and Nell's stories, please go and check out the other episodes. But we're just going to do a deep dive now into grief OCD. I'm interested to know, Nell, do you have any experience with grief OCD or OCD in general?
I've definitely experienced OCD, but not necessarily that I have acknowledged being linked to my grief. That's not to say it won't come in the future. I'm still very early on in my grief journey. As I've learned with grief, it comes in waves. Some days it's worse, some days it's better. So I'm actually very interested to hear your views on it.
OCD is an interesting one. So if anyone doesn't know what it stands for, it's obsessive compulsive disorder. And I feel like I've had instances of it throughout my life without me ever really realising. And as you say, not necessarily associating it at the time to my grief. I wrote down a few examples of things that I do to just get it out there. It's something that I've not really spoken about much before, but we'll go for it this time.
Well, thank you for sharing, because it's not easy to
I think it'll do me good. Like we were saying in the last one, good therapy.
Free therapy.
So in terms of things that I used to do a lot more of that I do a bit less so now, things like I couldn't cope with odd numbers. So I'd have to eat everything in an even quantity. I'd have to sometimes turn light switches on and off a certain amount of times. I had germophobia for a while where I would worry myself that I was going to get sick to the point where I then was sick, which is counterproductive. I couldn't go up a flight of stairs without counting them. That was one that I forgot that I did until my boyfriend asked me if I still did it. And I was like, no, that's good. I don't do that anymore. Volume on phones or listening to music, I couldn't do that on an odd number either. Or if I had my old iPhone, iPod, it would have to be perfectly in the middle. Otherwise, I couldn't listen to the music. Other things like body twitches, sometimes if your body just spasms, and then I feel like I have to keep doing it until it feels...
Does it feel like it's uneven? I have that sometimes. Or if I've turned, I have that. If I turn around one way, I look really weird. And I have to turn the opposite way. And then sometimes I'm like, oh no. So then I do it again until I feel like we're in center. Okay, I can continue.
That's exactly it. It's like I feel something just doesn't feel right. So I have to keep doing it. And it's weird because sometimes it's a certain number that I aspire to do. And then sometimes you just do it until it feels right. And you don't really know when that's going to be. So sometimes it can be quite a long time. I couldn't step on cracks in a pavement for a long time. And when I did, that was like meltdown. So a number of things that I used to do that I didn't necessarily associate with my grief. But then it kind of came to a head a couple of years ago when we were first in that lockdown. And I started getting really bad in the sense that I thought if I didn't do certain things, then people that I cared about were going to die or something bad was going to happen to them. I know that probably sounds really weird to a lot of people, and it is quite weird in a way. But it's one of those things where your brain, when you're thinking in that rational mindset, you're like, that doesn't make sense. But then once you're in that panicky, anxious state, you're like, okay, but what if I don't do it?
It's like, what's the harm in doing it? Because if I don't do it, this could happen. But if I do it, it won't. So let's just do it, and then we don't need to worry about all this.
I had so many instances of that, and I was literally going to bed every night doing the same thing over and over and over. And it came to a head when I realised that I think I'd spent just over an hour and a half doing this thing, and I was like, this isn't normal, Ghislaine. You need to start talking about this. And that was when I first sort of opened up to my boyfriend about it. I didn't even necessarily even then think that it was to do with losing my dad. I just thought I was a bit weird. I'd make fun of myself for it.
I think with OCD as well, I think with stuff in films and in the media, everyone instantly goes to clean freak. That's what they associate with OCD. So then when you say to someone, oh, I've got OCD or I've got OCD tendencies, or because I think we're all on a slight spectrum with it, and I think people will be like, oh, well, you're not like, as soon as you put a cup down, having to wipe it up and then go back, so that means you don't have OCD. And it's like, well, no, it can be small patterns, behaviours that you do every single day. Maybe not even every single day. It might be once a week on a certain day at a certain time. We have to do this thing. Might be like a once a year thing, but if you don't do it, like you said, you think the worst is going to happen, like someone in the family dying, which I think definitely when you link it in with the grief stuff will 100% be like brought on by that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it makes complete sense, because when my dad died suddenly, it wasn't like we had any time to process it. And I was obviously very young. I haven't been diagnosed, so I don't want to,
like claim that you have got it. Yeah.
claim it. Thank you. But I think given a number of the things that I did and that I still do to some respects, it is quite obvious to me that it's linked in some way. I've just been talking at you for
No.
10 minutes.
I was going to just go off what you were just saying about like needing a diagnosis. I think my uncle made a really amazing point the other day where he was like, obviously there are reasons we have them. They are good in certain settings, if it means people can get the help because they then are, registered for having this certain thing, like absolutely. But what his point was is that has the like idea that there's one normal and you're then below that for whatever reason. And as we've just been talking about, anxiety, OCD, grief, all of these things, we're all on a spectrum with all of these things. No one is normal. So I think it's more if you acknowledge that you are having these kind of tendencies, these behaviours, worry less about the diagnosis and more about how can we help with this? How can I put steps forward? I have like one thing I do quite a lot. So I've actually managed to slightly shift it. I used to, with the volume thing, when setting an alarm for work, my volume had to be on the center. If it wasn't, I didn't think the alarm would go off, and then I didn't think I would get up for work. But I ended up, it was my boyfriend clocked me doing it. I turn my Wi-Fi off when I go to sleep. Highly recommend it for everyone. You don't have loads of notifications coming through, but if you're an anxious person like me and you want to know if someone's trying to call you, they can still call you, they can still text you, but you're not getting Snapchat notifications all night long from your friends who are out partying and all that. I have like a bedtime routine for my phone, and it was just normal for me that I do this. And it's like I do like volume up, volume down, volume up, volume down, off, switch thing, do, and it's like this little like dance I do with my phone. And my boyfriend watched me this one day and was like, "What was that?" And I was like, "What? I'm just getting my phone ready for bed. I turn my Wi-Fi off, put my alarm on." And he's like, "Yeah, but you closed the app like 5 times. You went up and down in the volume multiple times, and then you had to check that it was on silent and then not on silent." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I mean, that was just what I've always done."
I'm like that with my alarms as well. I get so paranoid that I'm not going to wake up, but I don't know why, because I've never really slept through an alarm, but I still do that, and I have to set my phone on a specific volume as well. I count the clicks down, make sure it's all set up, so I completely get you there. I think for me, my OCD, same with anxiety and when I felt depressed as well, it kind of came in waves over time. So I would be fine going about my day normally, nothing wrong, go outside, walking along, look down. I know I stepped on a crack in the pavement and it just completely would blow up. But I will say though that over time, it's definitely gotten a lot easier. So once I'd sort of opened up about, oh, I go to bed doing this so that you don't die.
Yeah.
That's a nice conversation to have with someone. But I think once I'd sort of taken the leap and opened up in that respect, it definitely started getting better. As hard as it is, I had to just force myself into doing things. So like maybe not necessarily going cold turkey completely, but maybe rather than doing it 20 times, I do it 18.
It's slow steps, and I'm not going to name names, but I have a very close personal friend to me who, when we were at school, suffered with OCD. And at the time, I didn't really understand what was going on, but I remember the teachers just being like so unsympathetic. I remember the day she told me, and the teacher sat her down in the office and was like, "You have to tell Nell what's going on. Like, tell her." And they were like, "You're not leaving this office until you tell her." And now I know so much more about it. I'm like, in her head, in that moment, she may have thought her entire family was going to die if she told me, and she was forced to tell me right there on the spot. That is like how the education system failed her. Like, and I think that's why talking about it more, getting more people engaging with this kind of content and engaging with this kind of topic is so important, because people will pick up on things that they do, even from this podcast. Like, people will be like, oh my gosh, I do that with my alarm, whatever it may be. Hopefully, like, I hope what people take from this is that they're like, one, you're not alone, and two, if you can reach out to somebody, do it in your own safe space, in your safe way, because I would hate to see anyone, taking it to like a senior person, like a school, and being forced to then have to like tell their friends or tell people. There needs to be more education about it. There just needs to be. It needs to be spoken about more. And the only way more education is going to get out is when more people talk about it.
Yeah, I do still definitely do things and think, oh, why don't you just stop? And then I have to think about it and think through all the thoughts in my mind and think, Ghislaine, if you don't touch that, it's fine. Your mum's not going to die. It's okay. And then it's great, because obviously over time, when you stop doing that, you realise that actually she's still alive.
Yeah, you're proving it to yourself. Every single time you break that little like habit or routine, it's like, okay, this person didn't die, we're okay.
And then it's like a sigh of relief, and then you're like, okay, that means I can do it less the next day and less the next day. And eventually you just sort of get on top of it. And I think this is something that I've never even really spoken to my family about, I don't think, because I've always found it so hard to open up.
I'm better going to a complete stranger and telling them all of my issues, because that has no repercussions. I can have verbal diarrhea to them, and then I can walk away, and that never has to follow me again. Whereas when you say it to a family member, that sticks, and that's there. And like, it's like, oh my gosh, is this going to like taint the relationship that we've got now? Or are you going to look at me as like your weird child? Or do you know what I mean? Like, it's, you just want to seem, like what we were saying earlier, normal in everyone else's eyes. And in reality, none of us are normal. Every one of us has our weird little quirks, and that's okay. And that is what's normal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It's normal to not be normal.
Do you find, because me personally, humour got me through my grief. Oh my gosh, like, my friends thought I was crazy because I would just come downstairs laughing, and I was like, haha, my sister's dead. And they were like, okay, but that's how like I dealt with it. Like, as soon as I found out, had maybe a minute of like screaming, tears, confusion, shock. And then the real shock hit me, and I just laughed. I just laughed and laughed. And I turned to my boyfriend, who was there at the time when I found out, and he was like, okay, this is weird. Like, what is happening? But he was incredibly supportive. I cannot thank him enough for like what he was like in that moment. But from that point onwards, I very much took humour like with me. Because it makes it more comfortable, like when you're laughing about things. And maybe it's not a good thing because people don't take it seriously, but for me, I find it so much easier when it's almost like I'm like kind of mocking myself. Yeah, that's me personally. But do you have the same thing? Do you find that like humour helps you?
I definitely do. I went through a period of time, maybe in my late teens, where I thought, this really helps me, so I'm going to do it more. And I could just see everyone around me get so uncomfortable. So I stopped for a while. I do specifically remember being in a large group on a table at dinner. Everyone my age, I was about 16, maybe 17. And they were all talking about their dads and all talking about what their dads were doing and why their dads are annoying. And I went, oh yeah, mine does that too. Like completely straight faced, and the whole table went silent. I wasn't even talking to all of them, but they'd all somehow heard me, and they all just turned and looked at me and went,
oh my gosh, I would have been laughing. Don't worry, I would have been laughing with you.
Thank you. So it was sort of around that time where I was like, maybe I should dial this down a bit.
It makes people uncomfortable, and that's not for everyone, and it can be a bit smack bang in the face for them, and they can be a bit like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Ultimately, it's your personal grief. So whatever works for you is what works for you, right? And now I've definitely sort of managed to warm up to people and open up to people a lot more, which I definitely think has helped. Maybe it was the fact that I was also not talking about my dad and then suddenly making jokes about it. But I think definitely, you know, with my boyfriend, I don't know if yours is the same, but we'll joke about it. I don't know, say if we've got a family gathering, he'll be like, so what time's your dad getting here then? And you like, we just bounce off each other.
Yeah, I definitely have similar things. Mine would be more like, because I've got another older sister and their names are very similar. So my boyfriend sometimes like stutters and says the wrong one. And like, again, like they'll be like, also like so-and-so's coming. And I'll be like, that would be weird if she turned up, wouldn't it? Like, and then he'll be like, oh God, sorry. And I'm like, don't apologize. Like, it's fine. It's funny. Like with the close people in your life, you've got to be able to have that kind of like, I think that shows a really good connection with someone if you can just be like completely, and it's about setting boundaries, don't get me wrong, like almost like having a safe word for your friends. It's like, it's okay, we can talk about this, we can joke about this. Everyone goes through grief in like such different ways, everyone grieves in different ways, everyone goes through, like, don't get me wrong, there'll be periods of my grief where I'm like, don't joke, this is not a time for jokes. But I think, yeah, being aware of that, being acknowledging of your feelings in different emotions and not feeling like you have to take it too seriously. I feel like there is a pressure sometimes where it's like, this is this really horrible thing that's happened to you. Why are you not sad? Prime example, it was my sister's 1-year anniversary. I didn't cry the whole day. I was happy the whole day. I had a really big like celebration of her life, and those people leading up to this had been like, okay, you're okay, you feeling okay? And I was like, I'm great. A week after, I had a whole breakdown, and that it came out in that way later. But in that moment, on that day where everyone had this expectation that I was supposed to be crying and supposed to be super upset, I was cracking jokes, I was laughing, I was just remembering really nice memories, stuff like that. So I think it's okay if you want to laugh, it's okay if you want to joke, to not feel guilty or shameful about the way that you're feeling, because you're probably not the only one who feels that way. And it's even if you were, it's okay that you feel that way.
I think that's such a lovely message, because for me, it was the 25-year anniversary of my dad dying 2 days ago. I felt guilty actually because I'd forgotten at one point during the day that it was that day. I thought, oh God, that's really bad. You know, I should know that. But I think you're exactly right in saying that everyone's different. So everyone will have different coping mechanisms, feel different on different days, and that's okay. Nell, I've really enjoyed talking to you today.
Thank you so much. I love talking about stuff like this, like engaging with other people and hearing new stories.
It's nice to get it off your chest, isn't it? But I think with the humour part, we'll definitely try and dive into that in another episode. But thank you, and thank you for staying for the bonus episode. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks.
Grief in Common is a podcast run by the Winston's Wish Youth team. The topics of conversation aim to provide comfort and make a difference to other young grieving people over the age of 13.
We hope to give listeners the confidence to talk about their own grief journey.
It's rare to be able to listen to other young people being open and honest about their grief and how they're feeling.
We hope this podcast reaches young grieving people everywhere and helps them to feel less alone.
From teenagers to young adults, students to professionals, we're all different, but we've all got grief in common.
Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. Thank you.